Hello, dear friends. This is John Connor speaking. Today, we're going to visit the legendary country that almost all of us know from Hollywood movies. The United States of America. Let's explore the heart of New York City to see if US history is as smooth as historians claim. We'll discover ancient structures buried over 20 feet deep in Manhattan. We'll uncover traces of a mid-19th century disaster that affected the world. We will see buried floors, windows sticking out from under the ground, doorways knocked out in windows, and the ancient Roman architecture already familiar to us from European cities in the center of Brooklyn. In other words, we will find traces of a catastrophe that swept across the entire planet in the middle of the 19th century. Stroll through the famous streets of the old city, finding remnants of star forts. Learn facts about the Napoleonic War. Explore signs of the city's hidden past. Visit Brighton Beach. Let's take a closer look at the remaining traces of the concealment of this city's true past, hidden everywhere in parks and building architecture. And most importantly, we will visit the famous Brighton Beach in search of traces of ancient buildings and Slavic monuments of the past world, scattered chaotically along the coast in the form of breakwaters. So, friends, are you ready to completely change your opinion about America? I invite you to the city of New York. Let's go. The War of 1812. Any one of us would react instantly to this phrase, the patriotic war of the Russian people against the French. But 6 days before the 500,000-strong Grand Army of Napoleon crossed the Neman River and began its path to total destruction. For thousands of years, in 1812, in Russia, thousands and thousands of kilometers of the Atlantic Ocean's water surface. Another war started that we weren't taught about in school. Anglo-American. Isn't it a strange coincidence? Or maybe it's not a coincidence at all. I did some digging into all the military conflicts of the second decade. 19th century. Here's an interesting picture that emerges from its first 5 years. Anglo-Dutch War, Anglo-Swedish War, Colombian War of Independence, Mexican War of Independence, Argentine War of Independence, Korean Revolution, Ottoman-Saudi War, Venezuelan War of Independence, Second, Anglo-Ashanti War, Paraguayan War of Independence. Our Patriotic War, Anglo-American War, War of the Sixth Coalition, Swedish-Norwegian War, Third, Anglo-Ashanti War, Anglo-Nepalese War. 100 Days in France, the Algerian War, the Second Serbian Uprising, and this is far from a complete list. Note that in 80% of these wars one of the parties is necessarily England or Spain. In terms of territorial coverage, almost half the planet is on fire. It seems like historians were being modest, waiting until the 20th century to start counting the world wars. But I won't get sidetracked by the global military issues of that time. Let's talk about a war that isn't ours, which is also referred to as a war on the American continent. The year 1812. Welcome to New York. In a city where the entire population of Switzerland could easily fit. To a place where the vastness of the Atlantic Ocean unfolds. To the center, where the world's finances are concentrated and the official management of the political economic model of the entire planet takes place. But let's leave aside the praises of this monster. It's time to dive into its belly and figure things out. Is this megacity really that young and modern? Or maybe it's here too. Thousands of kilometers away from the old world, we'll find traces of global change, a reshaping of the world.
Friends, do you see what's behind me? Giant columns of an ancient building. But this isn't Rome, it's Manhattan, New York.
So, to get a bit oriented, we need to know the following information. The founding date is considered to be 1624. The first explorer was originally an Italian navigator, but that's not certain. Historians are still arguing. The official discovery is attributed to the Dutch. Hence the connection between the current flag of Manhattan and the Dutch one. Explorers shipwrecked, natives helped them leave. They returned, conquering the land. Later, someone bought the island for $24. But they came back and began to conquer this territory. Until one fine day, a genius of capitalism thought it would be a good idea to buy the rights to this island from the Native Americans for $24. That's the amount Wikipedia estimates for the junk that the Europeans handed over to the locals for the rights to this island. So, what do you think the Europeans built here first? For the locals for the right to own this island. So, what do you think the Europeans built here first? That's right, a fort, specifically Fort Starr. The most interesting part is how they transported building materials to this fort, or how they sourced them locally. Stone. What kind of equipment did they have back then? In the 15th to 16th century, to build it, in any case, nothing, is left of the fort. So, what do you think was the main goal of the Europeans arriving in this place? Of course, trade. What do you think it was? For trade. European ancestors lacked skills in fur, but excelled in shipbuilding, trading for knives or mirrors. Let's not judge the skill of creating furs, hunting, skinning, drying, but shipbuilding and navigation were developed with a bang. And for them to cross half the world on ships, to exchange a bag of furs for a couple of knives or mirrors, was not a problem. But isn't it nonsense? Yeah, all right, let's not judge. The official history is fabricated for the masses. Let's explore ourselves, using insights from my films and those of my colleagues. So what's really going on here? Let's take a look for ourselves, considering the experience from my films and those of my colleagues from other channels. So what's going on here? The first question that obviously stands out is there anything in this city? Buried windows.
You see, there are two small windows. The ground level. And now, let's head down to the street. And these two small windows, I'm sure that on this side, there will be full floor. Voila! And that's all the magic. Here are the underground windows. We just saw this huge building. Notice that, right? The first stage of construction, the edging. Second, third, and then on top, there's the modern addition. These are my bold assumptions, but they're already being confirmed by my experience. So friends, take a look, okay. Our buried snotty floors, basement floor, in all the old buildings in the center of New York. Houses, like in Europe, of course, we can say that settlers from Europe came here, and they tried to build houses, similar to their cities, but not on the same scale. The doors and the windows are made. Notice the cutout. Here's the cutout. And the architecture of the building. I would say it's Gothic, but someone will correct me. As always, two levels of restoration. The first one is gigantic, the second one is even bigger. And here comes something more or less modern. These are the skyscrapers of the past. I guess that's the New York City Hall. Notice the two-story building with big windows. The basement floors are partially buried. The entrance is knocked out in the window, with a staircase leading up to the second floor. The entrance is knocked out in the window. There's a staircase leading up to it on the second floor. Well, and here, you can clearly see 2, 3. Keep going in this direction. Everything's done to the max, just as it should be, I think, friends. Originally, this level had these huge doorways, windows, and columns. It was half destroyed. Actually, those who rebuilt it found it in a terrible state. They adapted it. And the further architecture is from the 19th century, when Manhattan was being developed. This is what we see in this version. The style is a bit different.
Guys, just take a look at the architectural design. Like two peas in a pod, that's our style, familiar all over Europe and the world. These are shots of the lower part of Manhattan, the place where Fort Amsterdam was originally built.
Nothing is even hidden here, just like in our cities. Look, there's a door in the window. Well, the rose is painted, obviously. Here's the excavation, and there go the basement floors. Nobody is hiding anything. People just don't pay attention. And here's the ground level. And check out what we have here. No kidding, to be honest. The depth here is about 6 or even 9 meters, I'd say. It's really deep here, folks. Well, this is getting serious. Look at this window. Here it is. Here it is. Folks, pay close attention to this one window. And then there's a second window. 2 levels, skies, 2 levels. This is indeed just something else. You can quite clearly see the very center of Moncton really well from the side. The main thing is not to lose your phone. Here. Besides the windows that are already built in, see that? Yeah, a window. Here are 2 windows. Look closely. A window has been bricked up. And here was a staircase. And they took out the staircase, but they left the door, or rather, the window that was converted into a door. And everything is just right there in plain sight. Check it out. It was a window, now it's a door. Of course, friends, many of us are already advanced alternativists, and the topic of buried windows or underground floors. Old and knocked down. Hang in there for a bit. I promise the second half of this film will have a really interesting and in-depth analysis. Well, for those who just joined us or are watching this film from another continent, just a reminder, the official version doesn't tolerate any criticism. So, there are 3 options. They built it by intentionally burying the house 8 meters underground, to be continued. The second option, cultural layer. So, the people who built these massive structures were so dirty that they literally trampled themselves into the mud, which is why several floors ended up underground, including in the center of Manhattan. Well, and the third option. Of course, houses settle, shrinkage, and it happens all at once, all around the perimeter, without cracking, just sinking into the cities. Check out my films, friends. The whole playlist is called Discover the World Around You. You'll be surprised. All around the world, in almost every big city. It's the same picture. Manhattan is an island. Look, a human-sized door. Accordingly, in ancient times, building underground spaces here was extremely dangerous. And look at this, a human-sized door, right? Now, check out where it was made. Do you think this is a window opening? Look where it was taken. What do you think? Is this a window opening? Or were there doors here before, and then they turned into these kinds of doors? By the way, they're even filming a movie here. Want to hear something funny, friends? I just asked the police officer standing by those giant doors. He says, "Buddy, are we in the States or in Rome?" He says, well, he smiled. I said, "Incredible, what building? What year is the building from?" He says, "Man, I'm trying to remember." Well, in the end, he didn't say anything to me. Then I stepped back, and behind him, there's a tile with the inscription 1902. So the locals, going about their business, don't even pay attention where they work. You're right, the Pantheon is impressive. No, the Pantheon is impressive. This is the courthouse building in the heart of Manhattan. Windows, windows, windows. Base, a carved door. Here, 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 pay attention, one. More windows, windows, windows. A little column. Vacuum. Here you go, a staircase. We're going down, see that? A little window. Here's a little window right under the staircase. Here it comes out to this spot. And 1, 1, 1. 1, 1, 1. Fuel. My phone. Hold on, main goalie. Just like that. That's it. Can you see the door? Let's step back slowly. And this window is like that. All around the building. But if we take this brick wall and dig the building down further, I'm sure there's another floor down here.
And yet, Lady Luck hasn't abandoned me. I managed to find a construction site, a restoration project, where just like at the Moscow Polytechnic, the builders dug a trench on one part of the building. Unfortunately, the footage is not as stunning, but you can clearly see from the color of the brick that it was underground and how deep the machine dug into the earth down. And here is this building from the side, old brick. Well, what does it tell us? Official history. Yeah, of course, there were wars and battles, there were some local skirmishes, and the extermination of Native Americans. Official history. Yes, of course, there were wars and battles, there were some local skirmishes, extermination of Indians. In the end, no one denies it, but there can be no talk of any global catastrophes. And bare-assed Indians used to live here. Please forgive me for that expression. But from the artifacts left in museums, a picture emerges of a complete, total, primitive society, as they say, practically like Papuans. And here, we see giant buildings standing before us to this day. Friends, I'm not a professional builder, but it's not hard for an ordinary person to guess that these beautiful carved houses with patterns and columns, made of blocks or bricks, are way more complex to produce than those modern concrete boxes that are crammed all over our planet. That these are beautiful carved houses with patterns, columns, block or brick. Much more difficult to produce than those modern concrete boxes that are stuffed all over our planet. Well, yeah, alright. It's getting dark, and we're moving on to the next site.
Damn it, this isn't Brighton Beach. What beach is this? This isn't a beach, this is Emansavi. Okay, fine, this is Emansavi. It's not far from Brighton Beach. Alright, but this isn't Brighton. You can't speed here because everything's all muddy. We're driving slowly. You can't race here because everything around is in Melta. We're driving slowly.
Many of you probably remember the buzz from a couple of years ago that went around the Russian internet about how one of the Brooklyn residents found on the coast of Brighton Beach images of faces on breakwater stones, very similar to the faces of Slavic gods and traces of technological processing of the stone. Naturally, when I got to Brighton Beach, the first thing I did was I went looking for those stones to check out this information and provide you with either a refutation or proof. We're going live from Brighton Beach, where we're investigating the traces of megaliths. I went to look for those stones to check out this information and provide you with either a refutation or proof.
We're going live from Brighton Beach, where we're investigating the traces of megaliths. At the very least, we've already found a hole, presumably for drilling. No need to have many orders wet.
Overall, I have to admit, I was a bit disappointed. Yeah, I really found signs of drilling, but it looks a lot like how parts are drilled off a monolith. Drilling holes and then chipping away pieces of the block. There were also round holes found, basically the same signs of drilling. Sometimes we came across suspiciously smooth surfaces. But, unfortunately, no faces. I personally didn't see anything there. I managed to read online that these faces might be harmful. They appear during low tide. I'll leave the stone coordinates now. Therefore, I had to postpone my operation of searching for the faces of the gods until the evening. In any case, I'm going to leave the coordinates of the location of these stones right now, so anyone who's in New York at the moment can check it out for themselves. And if possible, send me any photos and videos, so that anyone who's currently in New York can check it out for themselves. And also, if possible, send me any photos and videos. And also, in the upper right corner, there will be a link to Igor Alpatov's channel, the original discoverer of these mysterious stones. There are actually 3 whole movies, according to his research. Well, we're moving on to Brooklyn, to the final and most interesting part of our adventure. So, here we are in Brooklyn. And the first steps bring the first surprises. This looks like an American apartment, but is an ancient Roman insula. But, take away the advertising signs, clear the roof of antennas, and what you have in front of you is an ancient Roman insula. A sample of a multi-story residential building with spaces intended for rent. The 3rd century BC. By the way, they say everything flows, everything changes. And here we are, thousands of years have passed, yet in the designs of income-generating buildings, everything is still the same. Or maybe not thousands. Let's figure this out. This is a Protestant church, without the domes we're used to seeing. But the locals say the choir here is something else. I was drawn to the classic architecture. And because of the clock on the facade, the building looks more like a post office or a bank. Wait a minute. Two heraldic shields on the front of the virgin forest. Where did the coats of arms go, and who took them down? A mark of ancient Roman architecture, that red brick again and windows nobody needs. And who is that bearded guy that looks like a pagan god? Brick, brick, it's that red brick again and windows that nobody needs anymore. Do you remember the comedy movie The Incredible Adventures of Italians in Russia? There were St. Petersburg lions chasing foreigners at every turn. It feels like déjà vu, or maybe there are just too many lions in Brooklyn. So what does the lion as a mask mean in architecture? Let me share a little quote from an official source. The lion is the highest sign of spiritual, mystical, astral power with the advent of Christianity, as it became one of the symbols of Christ. This is how we see it, like step by step, the image of the lion transforms into a talisman. In European art, the lion wards off dark forces against Christianity. It shows a Christian defender lives there. The dark forces that are against Christianity. And it certifies that a Christian, a defender, of the faith of Christ, lives in the house. End of quote. That's strange. So what do we do with the mask in Greece and Rome? I thought that the image of the lion there symbolizes Hercules' victory over the Nemean lion. Here we go again, some kind of confusion. Well, yeah, okay, the building. Does it look old, but the abundance of classical symbolism really catches my eye. Take a look at the pictures. A lion, on a vase, and on the heraldic shield, ornamentation, entrance, arch. By the way, the vase is duplicated in the drawings above the windows. What an interesting structure. This definitely used to be somewhere else. And after the transport, it was all messed up. It's put together, really, poorly. Joints and cracks. It's just awful. Even our drunks would have managed to connect these elements, even in the worst alcohol haze. Better. Apparently, after they filled the inside with soil, the walls started to bear a load that they clearly weren't designed for. The plates of this Lego started to spread apart. Honestly, the kilograms of mortar spent to fix the situation didn't really change much, they just slowed it down a bit. The process of deformation. What do you think of the empty pedestal? They transported it, carelessly put it together, and it looks like they forgot a few things. Or they didn't forget, but didn't put it up, because what stood here would clearly stand out from the old composition of all this fake secondary stuff. Honestly, this looks more like a fountain than a flower bed. This staircase stirred up a lot of emotions for me. Now, with some time past, I can take a slow look back at what I saw and what my camera captured. First, these columns clearly mark the entrance. The decorative design of the pedestals is beautiful. And nothing on them. So, there's something unremarkable there, more like a patch in place, where the sculptures used to be. After all, usually such an architectural ensemble should look like this. Or, like this. And here, there's nothing like that. That's why there's a feeling of incompleteness. Some kind of compositional emptiness. It's interesting to wonder what was here and why it was removed. Second, granite rods are inserted into the corners of the top part of the pedestal. Why? After all, it could have been done like this. But the masters were seriously concerned. I wonder how they got them there. What do you think? Write your opinion in the comments. By the way, these rods are clearly not just here for no reason, there's some intention behind them. But let's get back to our walk through Brooklyn. I've made it to the Triumphal Arch, the Marble Arch, at Grand Army Plaza. Erected in memory of the soldiers and sailors who defended the unity of the United States in the fight against the breakaway Confederacy of the Southern States. It was designed after the model of the Parisian Triumphal Arch by architect John Hemingway Duncan. Another copy. The first stone in the foundation of the structure was laid by war hero General William Tecumseh Sherman. In 1892, the arch was officially opened by U.S. President Stephen Grover Cleveland. At first, it looked pretty modest. It was only decorated with two reliefs on the inner walls feature equestrian figures of President Abraham Lincoln and General Ulysses Grant. Over the next 9 years, monumental sculptural groups were added here. The top of the arch is topped by a bronze Roman quadriga, pulling a chariot with Columbia, traditionally, symbolizing the United States. 2 winged angels of victory announce her arrival. They were installed on massive pillars. The multi-figure compositions Spirit of the Army and Spirit of the Navy. The inscription on the memorial plaque reads, "To the Defenders of the Union, 1861. 1865. Duration. Why is it that since ancient Rome, why only triumphal arches as symbols of victory? Why so many perimeter gargoyles? They haven't come up with anything new besides triumphal arches. And also, why so many gargoyles all around the perimeter? After all, in essence, as we are assured, it is simply a decorated drainpipe. Is it possible that such a quantity of liquid accumulates at the top of the arch when it rains? Or are we seeing again an example of mindless copying of old buildings without understanding their purpose? Well, that Nika hugging the eagle with Neptune's trident and a second degree of obesity really cracked me up. It's like a real mashup of horses and people. Next on our route, we come across the public Brooklyn Library. Now that's the truth. Horses and people really got mixed up in a jumble. Next on our route, we come across the public Brooklyn Library. And what do we see here? The same architecture. Doors in the windows. Well, the most important thing is the excavated so-called basement level on the sides, which is 2 meters deep from the end of the 19th century. Friends, built like this in Brooklyn too. And now, take a look at this really interesting corner of the building. Foundation changes underground, turn corner, voila, brickwork, full windows, normal size. The foundation goes underground, but just wait until you turn the corner. And it's like a brick wall with no hint of a foundation. No waterproofing, full-sized, windows, and normal dimensions. The door is 2 meters underground. Classic stuff, right?
So, what is this, by the way?
This is a laboratory. What year is it from? And again, friends, the Roman Insula. How do you distract tourists with brains? With minimal investment in conspiracy and operations to hide important details. Yeah, just slap a sign on the wall that says half the truth. Yeah, just like that. At that time, we were building. Yes, of course, it has features of Roman classicism. But what will those who know how to look actually see? Everything made of brick was really built in the 19th century, but down below, all the stone masonry was done thinner, and by hand. Take a look at these chisel marks under the sign. You can practically see every hammer strike here. Take a look at the stones that are supposedly from the basement level. They were also chiseled, but they decided to give them the appearance of raw material on the front side. So, it's simpler and faster, right? The truth is, the stonecutters had to work hard on the first floor, making the blocks even, and the patterns on the arches beautiful. But here, at this point, their patience ran out. Or, the client stopped paying. Yeah, it's basically not important. The main thing is right here. Above the upper left corner of the decorative arch of the entrance door. They didn't finish carving the pattern and just abandoned their work, when only a few hours and minutes were left until its end. So, friends, the suburbs of Brooklyn, basically, it's almost a modern house. But here we accidentally find this little spot that's about 2.5 to 3 meters deep. And take a look, modern masonry, old masonry, 2.5 to 3 meters. And notice, modern masonry, old masonry. And what's interesting is, he's not alone. And here they've even done it up to 2 floors. Well, it looks like a sword, or something like that. Well, welcome to Brooklyn. From the neighborhoods of Brooklyn. Basically, modern houses, but nothing out of the ordinary. Except that each of them is packed with basement windows. Semi-basement spaces, and little doors for, I don't know. New Year's gnomes, maybe. And what's this? Are they trying to mimic ancient Rome again? I have a little thought about that. You've probably already noticed, friends, that one of the most popular and widespread architectural styles in the world is very clearly defined. This is what's called the Romanesque style. Depending on the century and geography, it could be called differently, as it was more convenient for the dealers in history. But in fact, guys, it's the same thing with a few changes. Why is this done? To slap our fakes on top of the rare remnants of the pre-flood world and claim that we built like this too? Or to build something similar over the old ruins and completely confuse everyone? This makes it harder for us to analyze the information we get. Or to build something similar over the old ruins and completely confuse everyone. It makes it harder for us to analyze the information we get. But I hope that together with you, I can separate the wheat from the chaff, friends. And here we have the Roman mascaron again, some kind of face in a helmet. There's an interesting idea to start collecting such photos into one folder, and then, after gathering enough, do a systematic analysis. I'm sure it will turn out to be interesting. Folder. And then, after accumulation, do a system analysis. I'm sure it will turn out to be interesting. When we start finding commonalities between different eras, styles, countries, and continents. Although I was more interested in the building on the left in this shot. At the bank, it's clearly red brick, just painted over in a monstrous color. Well, to wrap things up, friends, before we move on to our final destination. For today, for the most die-hard fans of buried floors, underground spaces, and utility rooms, here's a photo collection from New York. To make even the most hardened skeptic lose any doubts that this is how they built, since many buildings have already been found in such a state. So that even the most hardened skeptic has no doubts that this is how they built, since many buildings have already been found in such a state. They've just been inhabited. Yeah, they were restored, adapted for modern needs, and are still in use today, but already under a completely different beautiful legend. Interesting cannon. This type of howitzer is commonly known in English as the 12-pounder Napoleon Model 1857. This was the first artillery piece used in the American Civil War. During the war, the North produced about 1,100 of these cannons, while the South made around 600. At the Battle of Antietam in 1862, the Confederate Army used 27 Napoleons, the Federal Army 108. Under Gettysburg, the Federal Army used 360 weapons of various types, of which 142 were Napoleons. 12-pounder Napoleon. The Army loved it. It was safe to handle, reliable, and had good firepower, especially at short distances. This was the last bronze artillery piece in the American Army. Federal Napoleons are distinguished by their flaring at the end of the barrel, which was called the muzzle swell. Confederate Napoleons were produced in about 6 different variants, and mostly with a smooth end of the barrel. However, 6 guns with a flared end have survived. The effective range of fire from such a gun was from 800 to 1,000 yards, depending on the projectile, and the maximum range of firing. A cannonball exceeded a mile. This information, friends, will be useful for our further analysis. Well, this is where my stroll through Brooklyn came to an end, and ahead of me were the bastions. New York, which reliably protected the city from the water during the War of 1812. And the most powerful fleet in the world, the British, didn't even dare to approach its shores. According to maps and videos, our megaliths, or faces, should be in these piles. These breakwaters, as my friend mentioned, were brought here from an unknown location. You can see technological holes on them, which can be explained by the fact that these stones were chipped from the original rock. You can really see the technological holes on them. But they are easily explained by the fact that these pieces of stone were chipped off from the original rock. Unfortunately, I didn't find any faces, which isn't really surprising. Things from 2013 may be gone. After all, the drawings were originally discovered in 2013. A lot of time has passed since then, and those stones could have just been taken away from there.